Hi, this is Dan Humber from HarvestFires.com. If you're watching this, you're probably dealing with the installation of a Firestop kit. In this case, it may be for a model 7250 CaseIH combine. This little section of video is designed to show you how to assemble the tin components for the enclosure around your exhaust system and assemble it on the bench. We've bent up the parts in the previous video, and now we're going to see if we can't fit them together and test the angles that we bent them at and identify where they go and get a feel for the orientation of the parts before you get on the combine. At the present time, I do not have a 7250 close to me to be able to climb on one and actually do test fit these parts. I think that they'll fit, but there may be adjustments that you have to make in this, especially with these first couple of kits that get sent out. Eventually, I hope to have a proven kit, one where I put it on a combine and made any adjustments and then incorporated those adjustments into the computer model so that your cut parts fit as closely as possible. This isn't that way because I just don't have time, and there aren't that many 7250s around right now. This is the 2022 year. It just came out, or this is for the model 2022 year, and there aren't very many of them out there yet. And so I don't have one close by. But this will show you how I intend them to go together and on the combine, and it may get you through the process of doing the installation on the combine as well as doing it on the bench. On the bench, it also gives you the opportunity to thread the screw holes when you put it together, so that when you're on the combine, they go together easier. Some of the screw holes are hard to reach, and so if it's been pre-threaded and you can reach back in there and blindly thread a screw in with a little stubby screwdriver, that's much better than having to cut threads with that little screwdriver when you can barely reach it there. So I recommend, especially for the ones that are kind of underneath or in the back or in awkward places to reach, that you put screws in there now while it's on the bench. Once you have it assembled, you can also mark the thing up with a Sharpie so that you can see where edges meet and mark where they meet and overlap, so that when you get on the combine, it's kind of just match up the lines, and it makes it pretty easier to put together, rather than get on there and go, now how does this part match up to another one? So we'd encourage you to do that. Before I start doing the actual assembly, I always make this cautionary statement that the kit works, but I cannot guarantee that you will never have a smolder on your combine. There are just too many other things that can cause a smolder to guarantee that. So we'll do the best we can to get your exhaust system enclosed, keep it full of clean filtered air there so that the dusty air can't get in around the exhaust system, and that should stop the ignition of the dust at the exhaust components. But still be cautious when you're combining and be vigilant, I guess. I'm going to try to put the kit together on the bench here mostly in the order that you would on the combine, just to help with that assembly process. There may be places where we deviate from that, but I'll try to do it in that order. So I'm going to get you looking at the bench, down at the bench here, and then I'll do the assembly in front of you. All right, I'm dealing with part number 1. It's a really confusing looking part, and again it has this patch on it because of the mistake in the laser on this first cutting of it. But it goes together with part number 2 like this. You can always tell which is the outside of the part generally because it has the larger pilot hole in it. So if you're putting the screw through the small hole first, you may have it oriented wrong. Having said that, I just oriented it wrong. And this one looks to me like I may have a mistake in the computer model. When I look here, there are no pilot holes behind this, and there should be some. The good news is that we have self-drilling, self-tapping screws. So I'm going to push this on and put screws through here the hard way. That was probably a mistake in the design process, that those holes didn't line up. So that's part number 1 connected to part number 2. Part number 3 should overlap like this. And the screw holes seem to line up. Okay, on your combine, you would be assembling this around the left-hand end of the exhaust manifold. So you'd slip this piece in place, slip this one underneath, slide this one with the flanges over the top of the front piece, and you're going to have an air, the compressed air line going to your intercooler is right here, so it's going to be tight in there. And then you put these screws in. Now you may be able to do them with a screw gun. You may end up doing some of them with this little stubby thing, and that's again why we pre-thread these holes, so that if you have to reach in a tight space and do that, you can do it. So we've got first piece on the second piece, third piece on the second piece, and we're off to the races here. Let's skip 4 and go to 5. This is number 5, and I'm going to make a correction to my earlier thing. When we bent it, I left this straight. That should probably come out 90 degrees to match the other one. And then this piece with this little bend will line up with those, and we should have 2 screws that we can put in there to hold it together from this side. Okay, now I was able to, on the bench, to put both these screws in relatively easily. On the combine, you got the turbocharger compressor is right here, and it may make it impossible to get that one in there. If you can reach in from this side with the long driver and get it in, great. This one you should be able to reach. It's up at the top. It's in the open. This one may be really tough to get back in there and do that. Try to get it in there. If you can't, there's enough other screws that'll tie things together here that I think it'll be all right, but we try to put as many in as possible. So that's part number 5, and I think we can come back to part number 4 next. And part number 4 will lay inside of part number, oh, I take it back, I've got this oriented differently. Pretty tight, but it should go. All right, I want you to look at this because this piece went up from the bottom, in this case, on the outside of the previous piece. Oh, and look, I've got a screw there that I should probably take out and put in. I went over the top of one, so I'm not going to change that right now, but I should undo this and take that screw out and put that in after the fact. So that one that I told you was going to be so hard to reach, you would put that one in after you get this piece in, this last one in place, and you reach in back there and put that screw through if possible. Now, these 3 screws that I just put in here go from the inside of the enclosure to the outside. They are some of the only screws in the kit that go from the inside towards the outside, because you can reach them here. You can't reach back here to put them in place because the compressor is right here. Now, these poke out, and there are 3 holes, 3 places made here to put screws through. You may not need all 3, but hopefully one of the 3 will hit a recess in that compressor casting so that it'll clear that screw head. So the screws will clear. Otherwise, if they bump into that, it'll push this away from the compressor, and we don't really want to do that because we want it to seal up against the face of that. So find one of these 3 screws that fits into a gap there and use that one, or 2 of them or 3 of them if you can. And you could even end up cutting off a screw or shortening a screw to put one in there once it's threaded. That might be okay too. But really we want this to go up flat against the compressor face, and if those screws poke into it, they'll push it back away. So this one you may be able to reach in from the right-hand side behind the turbo and shoot it in there. You may and you may not, but you should with the long driver. You might be able to reach that one and get him in there. So that's part number 5. This is part number 6, and it will lay over the top of this flange, or if you're looking at it from the bottom, it's up inside the kit from that flange. And we're going to put 2 screws through from the bottom here. This is the bottom of the enclosure. So in order to put these in, you would have to reach up underneath the turbocharger exhaust turbine to get at these. You may have to do that with a little stubby screwdriver. And this one in the back, this one is made so that if we can get a long driver through here, we can shoot it through from way outside here, kind of like I'm doing here, but your driver would even be longer. And pull that together, which it did here, but then I've got exhaust turbine right here, so it's and turbocharger bearing right here, so it's a tight space. You may or may not be able to get that one in there, but try. This last hole here, don't put anything in there yet because we're going to wrap something over the top of that. Part number 7 comes up from below, and if we've done it right, the holes will line up. Okay, I didn't put all the screws in, but you would probably want to. Now note I'm on the bench. I can easily put these in place. When you're on the combine, you're reaching underneath the exhaust compressor or the exhaust turbine to do that. Some of them are easy to reach, some of them are not so easy to reach. These are around the oil line, so they're tougher to reach. Get as many in as you can. If you absolutely can't reach one, well, that's okay. And then we have, these are where the oil lines, the compressor, the bearing oil line going up will go through there, and the drain line coming back down will come through this larger one. I'll tell you here, when you do the assembly, you want to adjust with these pedals on here and maybe a needle nose pliers, bend them out as necessary to increase the size of this opening. If you have to cut it open farther, that's okay too. You just don't want a great big hole here so we dump all the air out in one spot. And you also want to bend these pedals so that they are parallel to the oil line. I don't want the sharp edge of this laser cut tin that's kind of hardened perpendicular to your oil line, because if it should vibrate there, it could cut that oil line, and we definitely don't want to do that. So bend them so that they don't impinge on that oil line at all. And then if you need to tighten up the space to limit air loss around there, do it with some of that aluminum foil tape. Same thing for the return line coming out here. Adjust it as necessary to fit around that. Give it a little clearance, and then if you need to fill up any of that clearance with tape, go ahead and do that. Okay, that was part number 7. Part number 8 lays in this tray back here and screws up from the bottom. This is where you find out whether your bend angles were correct or not. This screw hole here, the larger one, is on the inside, and that is again one of those where it may be easier and possible with a long driver to put the screw through from the inside to the outside, just like that. That's part number 8. Part number 9 lays right in here on top of that arrangement. And adjust our bends a little bit to make it fit close. Looks to me like I need to trim out a little bit of this tab here. It's in the way. That's probably a flaw in my design. Probably don't need to tell you, once you cut this, it's sharp, so be careful after you've done that. And that wasn't quite enough. There. Now it'll go. Alright, I'm going to bring this piece in here, and it's kind of a combination of above and below. It splits here. I guess it can do either one. Let's just bring it in from underneath. I come from underneath, and there are some of these screws, these 3 on the inside, that are designed to hit from the inside out. Now these in the back I can put in here on the bench real easily. You're going to have to reach underneath and do that with a stubby. This one can go down from on top. I'm not sure I'm going to do that yet because I got a piece that's going to probably lay underneath here, and we'll catch that one at the same time. This is piece number 10. Got interference here again. maybe I bent these tabs, alternated them wrong. That's not a big deal. I just bent that one, cut a notch in it, and bent it back flat out. Now I think we're going to be good to go here. I can come in from the inside and put this one in. That one inside out to out. I'm going to put another one in here. And the other 2 would come from the bottom up. You'll have to reach around underneath here, or underneath the whole system, or behind here to get those. And that is a reach. You're going to need small hands to do it. Okay, that's enough for that one for right now. There's 2 more screws there that I would put in if I was assembling it on the machine. That was part number 10, I believe. Part number 11 will slide in here. It'll slide underneath the, I call it a choke. It's a flapper valve in your exhaust system, and slide in underneath that arrangement and straddle these 2 posts that are supports there. Come in like this, and we're going to catch it with these 2 screws from underneath. And then this one we should be able to reach from on top with a long driver. And this row in the back we should be able to reach with a long driver from on top. Part 11. Part 12 is the right hand end. and it should wrap around the end. And you'll have to, on the combine, you'll have to reach underneath to put the screws in. Some of them are easy to reach, some of them maybe not. Here I'll flip it up and put the screws through. Okay, I put enough screws to hold that together. That's piece number 12, the right-hand end of the kit. When you put that in place, you're going to have to slide it up from the bottom probably, and it's a tight space because you got brackets and supports there, and you may need to bend these tabs up here out in order to clear so that it'll come up far enough and clear or come up against the diesel exhaust catalyst. You may even need to trim this. I don't want to cut it short when I design it, so I may have left it a little long. And if it absolutely won't fit in there, you may have to trim this down a little bit. The idea with those fingers is you could bend them out so that they come up and press against that can and keep a halfway tight seal up there. Part number 13 lays right in here on the outside. This one's an easy one to reach on the machine. Okay, part 13 encloses the outside of the riser up to the diesel exhaust catalyst. That's in place. Piece number 14 fits alongside it. Start to make the rest of that enclosure. In my case, it's really tight here at the bottom, and I don't really need that whole tip there, so I'm going to cut that off. And I'm going to flatten it out after cutting it off because it. Number 14 in place. Number 15. 15 should go in place right here. This opening is for a sensor line from the exhaust system to come out. And you may have to adjust that, and I can see right now I'm going to have to pull the screw that I just put in there. Okay, if you can see this hole in here, there's a sensor line that has to come out somewhere, and I've done the best I can to locate that where it's likely to come out, but it kind of hangs in the air on the machine you're trying to measure, so it's hard to know exactly where it's going to come out. So we've made the hole a little bit larger, and we've given you some of those pedals again to bend out so that you don't have sharp edges against that soft polymer around the sensor line. If you need to cut this or move it, you can. If you end up cutting a big hole here, then patch it up with some of that aluminum foil tape so that we don't lose a lot of air around that spot. That's part number 15 in place. Part number 16 will lay right over the top here and should screw on easily. Okay, we have part number 16 in place. 17 is the top of the whole assembly, and it should lay in on top, And once you start putting screws in, if you follow around, one will pull the next one into line. Okay, I put in probably half of them, but that's part 17, the top in place, and now we have most of the enclosure. Part 18 should fit here. Well, there's a mistake. Apparently I sized the screw hole to about 3/8 of an inch. I don't think that's going to hold much. Fortunately, we got one here that we can use, and then we'll shoot some screws through to bypass those big holes. Okay, since these two hit blank holes underneath, I'll put one through next to it. Catch both pieces. Okay. I'll only do one of those on line here for you, but that one punch through, that'll pull it together. And there's lots of screws in that, it's not going anywhere. Okay, that was part 18. I hope you can see. This is the corner we're going to fill in with 19 and 20. Actually, looks like we got the bends pretty close when we bent that up before. And now this would slide around, I forget what this one slides around. One of these slides around the actuator rod for the wastegate controller on your turbocharger. And these two will slide in from both sides to clear that, I hope. Okay, those went on as intended. I don't know whether you'll be able to get these screws on this side on because the compressor turbine is right here. If you can get them in, great. If you can't, just bend it so it fits flush and put a strip of tape over the top of it. But this should enclose that wastegate actuator mechanism as closely as possible. If you have to trim to make it fit around here, that's not a big deal. You can trim before you slide these together, make sure it clears everything so you got free motion of that rod going through here, and it clears but fits as close as possible around here. And then if you need to tape up a little bit there, that's okay too. The last piece is this little one here. These intended to go on here in that location, and you would slide this slot behind you'd loosen the bolt down there on the block that holds the bracket, slide this in, and then put those two screws through there. See if I can lose the whole thing here. It's getting unwieldy. So we can put one of those in to hold that in place too. You'd have to put these in from the bottom, and it would take a small screwdriver. There we go. If you can't make that thing work, it probably won't keep the thing probably isn't going to fall apart, but it's nice to have it tied onto the block down there. So that's the enclosure completed or assembled on the bench. The screws run in many of the holes. I've only done about half. You should probably do the rest of them as well. You got tabs here and here that should be bent to fit up against your diesel oxidation catalyst can, and these tabs around here also should be able to come up close to that can. So ideally they touch it so that you don't dump a lot of air out here or allow dust essentially to get to the pipe underneath here, because the pipe underneath that can is still going to be hot. Once it gets into the diesel exhaust catalyst, that's hot as well, but it's not so hot as to ignite dust, I don't think. This 4-inch hole is where you're going to bring your air supply in. We'll have a start collar, a HVAC start collar that will go in there and lock in there, and then you tape that, screw it down, and then tape that in place. And there's this Flex 90 that comes up out of that, and you've got a rubber connection to go onto there and point to where we need to go with the next piece of pipe. You'll find that if we haven't bent the angles right, you can adjust them on the fly a little bit, and then when you start putting screws in, it kind of pulls everything together and into alignment. So that's the basic assembly of the tin kit for, in this case, the 7250 case combine. I hope that it fits as designed. If it doesn't, I need to get the feedback from you as to exactly where you had to cut or trim so I can adjust that model so that the next guy gets one that fits without having to trim as much. All right. I hope that this works for you, or does, improves your harvest, or makes it much less stressful. Please continue to be vigilant on the machine, but I hope that this solves some of the problems for you that occur in those volatile crops. Have a safe harvest.